And welcome everyone once again to the Aftermath. This is the LPL recap coming hot to you after week number 2 for episode 2. As of course, it is myself, Orbital. With me is still Ferris. We are still here covering or recapping all the matches. And then we still have Yanni, who fell asleep once again, this time a little bit of the long way. So, out of the chair, on the floor. He's having a good time. He had a ball of a time, though, on the mic this week. So, big shout out to Yanni. He deserves his rest. But we had a hefty amount of games here today and last week as well, with an extra game that was actually played, I believe, today. So that's a whole series in and of itself, Ferris. You have to be excited for it.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many games being played. And we talked about the format, the new format in the last episode, and we're kind of like feeling the whole impacts of it now with how many games are being played. Best of fives every single day, 8 whole best of fives in 1 week. That's a crazy amount of games. So we're seeing a whole lot of action, lots of stuff to cover. And yeah, Yanni sleeping sideways, snoozing it up. Casted top esports versus we, and actually casted the matchups this morning as well, RNG versus IG. So been getting in on the action. We'll get a couple of his takes in this episode. But yeah, again, going to be snoozing it up, and we'll see him in future episodes. And yeah, I'm excited to continue to cover it here. Orbital, keep talking about it, and yeah, give us some discussion about what's been going on over in the most exciting league in the world.
This is going to be very exciting because we're starting things off with Invictus Gaming versus Ninjas in Pajamas. This is a matchup that you and Yanni were looking forwards to just because of NIP rocking out here, and boy did they give us a pretty good series.
Yeah, they did. So my prediction heading into this was that IG was going to take it 3-1. It ended up being the reverse. But my thought process there was, okay, so we have a really exciting roster in IG. Obviously, NIP is super hyped up as well. But IG, they had more reps on their actual roster, full roster in the Demacia Cup. Doinby coming back. Obviously, he's been practicing. Obviously, he's not just coming out off the couch, but joining up with the team first game on the stage. Maybe they'd feel a little bit of nerves. Maybe they'd have some problems, but I think I just forgot how good some of these players are. And Shanji in particular surprised me, or didn't surprise me, but he reminded me of who Shanji is. And then Leave as well, the 80 carry
Yep.
role for Ninjas in Pajamas too. The guy was tearing it up on EDG before he had a little bit of a hiatus, but now back in the league. So Shanji and Leave, two players that really impressed me in this one.
I mean, I think I'm right there with you. I mean, 25, 12, and 21 over the course of 4 games for Leave is nothing to scoff at. 3.8 in the KDA record, but everyone else rocking above a 4.5 to an extent. I mean, Shanji, yeah, 3.9, but as you said, still surprising. 10, 8, and 21 overall. Now, the big deal, though, is Yanni was also predicting a much closer series, I believe. Still looking at IG to take the victory. It was a 3-2 setup there, but overall, both kind of blown away, and we have to give credit. NIP is starting to look good, or was it IG that just kind of left things a little bit to the sideways? I mean, the Shy looked a little bit rough. I mean, JJ
Yeah.
was able to really have a ball, but just no one else was really able to connect in there.
There was some things I saw on Twitter about game two when the Shy picks Karma top. They picked that. The Shy had no practice on this champion, by the way, or at least so I've heard, at least minimal practice. And they picked it just to deny it from Doinby, who is
Yep.
practicing a lot of the Karma mid. So, and I saw a little bit of conflicting opinions on Fearless with stuff like this. It's like, oh, this isn't competitive because they're just picking things to deny another player, and they're not, it's kind of, it doesn't really feel like authentic. And then other people were saying, well, it's their choice, they weren't forced to make
Yep.
that pick. But that was an interesting thing. And so you're talking about the Shy and being a little bit mixy in the performance there. That was a weird one. The Karma top was not it. And then Ninjas and Pajamas dropped the first game. They had Shanji on Maokai, but then they put him back on the Ambessa and the Renekton for game 2 and 3. And then Shanji is just a carry player. This guy's Rumble's really good. This guy's a carry player. He likes to take over. Don't put him on the Maokai here. And I think NIP going forward. I mean, what a statement series to open up
Mm-hmm.
against a formidable team in the LPL.
Oh, 100%. I mean, IG, a team that we expected to be at the top already starting here, now falling to 1-1. This now means Group D is actually fairly competitive in the coming weeks. These next week 3 and 4 will be very defining to see who really steps up and takes lead in this group, because all the other groups, as we move on to JDG and Ultra Prime, I mean, this one's a little bit more cut and dry. We have to call it for what it is. JD Gaming, I mean, this was expected.
Yeah, it was expected. I don't know. I had some problems with Ultra Prime's drafting, especially game one.
Mm.
So they go with the Rumble, they go with the Aurora, and then they go with the Varus. Which again, AD champion, they have Xin for 80 damage, but then it was Wako playing, I have it in my notes here, a Wit's End second item. And it just felt like, I mean, you just so overloaded on the magic damage side of things that it just really didn't feel like they were ever going to be able to eat through a champion like Cassante, which was the pick of choice there for Ala in that game one. And that just set the tone. They got absolutely smoked in that game one. Game two, a little bit closer, but I mean, it's one of those things where these weaker teams like Ultra Prime, even if they're going blow for blow a little bit to start, it never feels like they have control and are making the proactive plays so that when they actually get a lead, they're going to be able to translate and win. And it just feels like JDG, they're just on cruise control. They know they're going to win the game and they make the right plays at the right time. And even when it looks a little close, like, yeah, it really wasn't. And then the game three composition from Ultra Prime, they had the Tryndamere mid, the Jax and the Elise orbital, like crazy. I don't
Okay,
know
okay.
what they were trying for.
We can't crap on the Elise a little bit too much. I mean, the Elise has some reasoning in there, but it's got to be practice. I think that's what we really got to go down in there. It has to be practice, and unfortunately, it felt like Rosie Love didn't have the greatest experience that time. Not only that, JDG had the right responses. The Ezreal and the Galio in that match just felt stalwart. They left nothing to chance. I mean, FaZe 22-2 and 22, by the way, one of the
Yeah, crazy.
cleanest just score lines I think I've ever seen out of someone. Only second to the god himself, Faker, who had, by the way, still the funniest meme stats I've ever
I
seen in a
know.
league.
And it's also awesome too because Pays is 22 kills, 22 assists, which then and then he also two deaths. So that makes his KDA 22.0.
Yeah. Just
So
it's so
it's
clean.
just twos. It's half of Jin. I don't know. That's crazy.
I feel
And
that's
I
also
didn't
like,
even notice that.
yeah, it is so clean, but it does show the strength of JDG and why we have listed them as one of the top dogs moving into the rest of the season. This is a team that we do expect to continue onwards in their upwards trajectory, and hopefully see a little bit more as well. They are currently sitting within, I want to say, reasonable standings overall, but we'll see how much further they can go, because they had another match a little bit later on in this week, which was I believe the only 2 series team that we needed to watch this week. So taking a look further on, we had Edward Gaming versus Thunder Talk Gaming, and Yanni had predicted Thunder Talk Gaming to take it 3-1, and he was spot on.
Yeah, looking back at my predictions right now, I also predicted the 3-1 for Thunder Talk. And the reason I'm predicting this, if I were to look at the Thunder Talk, and I think I touched on this in the last episode, if I were to look at this Thunder Talk team prior to Demacia Cup, prior to the other matches that they've had, I would have said, I don't know who's going to take the series, because both of these teams on paper don't look the strongest. But Thunder Talk, I think, in the Demacia Cup, they proved that this is like an actual legit dark horse style team. Probably won't end up winning LPL or anything like that, but they are a cut above these bottom tier teams, which I think EDG is definitely one of those. And their win against LNG was super impressive in the previous week. I think this 3-1 was pretty expected. They had the hiccup in the first game, but then they bounced back. And that was the exact same thing for LNG. So this team isn't really knocked super easy. And their team fighting and the way that everyone pulls their weight to Orbital is really impressive. They do have star players like 1xN and say Tab, but even there's moments where, Hoya is finding the right engage. Hoya is surviving on the weak side. Beishuan is getting some crazy steals as well. So, I mean, I'm impressed with this team for sure.
I think Hoya has so far been very impressive overall. Just from weeks 1 and 2, has really given themselves as a consistent player. So I love the fact that we are giving love over to this TT squad, and hopefully they continue onwards. The diversity of the champions in the mid lane also surprised me. I think we had an Aurora plus an Akali plus a Yasuo. Now, granted, these are all relatively within the wheelhouse for say tab, but it's still surprising to see on the other end when you got things like the Rise, like the LeBlanc trying to come out here. It's just like, let's go melee, let's have a ball, and it ended up with say Tab running a 6.0 KDA, 18-8 in 30, highest on the team for the series. I mean, 1XN was pretty close to 28, 11, 26, but as an ADC, unfortunately, you're targeted just a little bit more.
And I think 1XN is going to be the real deal here soon. I saw a lot of people praising 1XN after the series. I would say I haven't been watching a lot of this player, not a whole lot last year, but this year, I know watching all of these games, I've been paying a lot more attention to this player. I see bright things in the future. I'm seeing some really nice plays come out from 1XN, being that big carry, and is a relatively new player to the LPL. So I'm excited to see more, not only from the team, but again, a player like 1XN it's very exciting. It's always exciting to see new talent rise up and be able to challenge some of the top dogs. And we are going to see that eventually with TT, because they did lock playoffs here, Orbital, with this win.
And that actually means that EDG is actually on the chopping block here. 0-2 means they're just kind of fighting out there. That's the worst feeling in the world. And for this team, was this also an expected encumbrance? I mean, this is a team that does have a storied history, but to come out here, open things up in a split that obviously the opening matches require so much effort, and it feels like the opening weeks have already cemented your end or beginning to these playoffs runs in the likes and your placements. Was this expected for EDG in this fashion?
I think so. I think just with with the players that they have fielded here, they have some veteran presence in Angel, but they just haven't been able to really click and get it done here. Again, going back to the point that I made about Ultra Prime versus JDG, they have times where they're battling, they're fighting, they actually make some really nice plays, they win some team fights, but there needs to be that extra gear. That is the gear that I'm talking about, is when they actually use their advantages to win that game. And Thunder Talk, I feel like they definitely have that in the tank there. And an EDG kind of struggling to be able to finish off some of these games when they are actually battling in it, and TT with their good team fighting ends up taking over. So I think it's kind of expected here from the Demacia Cup and how well TT performed going into the regular season. They're a team that's a little bit, if you're making a tier list here, they're in another tier over EDG. So I think a result like this, going back to your point, is pretty expected.
All right. Well, you know what is going to be another expected one for LGD Gaming and Team We. LGD Gaming had some of the fastest games that I think we've seen here today, or at least in this series, 3-0 over Team We. And Yanni was actually predicting this to be a little bit closer, but Team We looking like they dropped the ball pretty heavily with 2 games sub 30. LGD Gaming feeling like they have a pretty strong read on the meta.
And I predicted this to be a 3-2 as well. So I'm expecting this to be 2 teams that we don't necessarily have a ton of expectations for. They're going to be kind of battling it out. But LGD, they were just blatantly the better team in this series. 2 games below the 30-minute mark. Climber 15-1 and 31. And I said in the previous episode, I was impressed with Climber in LGD's week 1 showing, but Orbital, dude, that's a performance in the jungle. That's an 80 carry KDA in the jungle. It's insane.
I mean, playing the champs that you do as well, it was a Sejuani for 1, which already kind of leans into the, okay, you only have 1 death. But then you pick Lee Sin, then you pick Pantheon. These are champions that are well known for basically sacrificing their life for the team. To rock out with only 1 death in all of that is crazy to me. And looking at Team We, it's not like they had a terrible read on the meta. You're taking a look at the Galio, the Xin Zhao, and the Aurora. I mean, even had a Corki thrown in for game 1. It just feels like they were outclassed at the end of the day, and unfortunately, that means they got to go back to the drawing board.
There are a couple of sort of draft things that I didn't like. I mean, the Caitlyn I'm a bot laner, so I usually have a lot of things to say about bot lane matchups. I think Caitlyn is a champion, and we saw this a little bit in the LTA today, which is not what we're talking about, but I think this was another problem. Is just Caitlyn needs to kind of be that counter pick if we're talking about draft things, and going up against something like an Ashe and a Seraphine, you're outranged. You can't really get the advantage you want in the lanes. And then LGD, they kind of just run over the game 3. And then it just doesn't feel like, talking about the draft and stuff, that it really was enough for Taeyun to really go off of. And again, yeah, struggling really hard, 3, 9, and 10. But everyone on the side of Team Wee struggled in the series. And it sucks too, because now they're 0-2. I think even if they're not out of playoffs, they are very, very close, and it's very unlikely they'll get there. And yeah, I don't know. They back to the drawing board. Maybe swap around some roster stuff. I don't know what it has to be, but they definitely don't look like any a contender at all. Any type of team that's going to be a threat.
Yeah, there will be. I believe there is a situation that can occur that Team We has an option, but it is wholly out of their hands at the current moment. I do not believe
Yeah,
that they have control over their own destiny right now. So it's basically that's not an area that you want to be in. Anyone that plays any competitive league knows that's not what you want to be. So unfortunately
yeah.
for Team We, we'll have to see how it pans out for them in Group A that has anyone's legend that is also rocking out pretty heavily. But we'll get to that one a little bit later. Going back to JDG's second series coming out here, this was the only 3-2 of the entire week, and man, was it a banger from start to finish. It was extremely fun to watch, but it was JDG taking the victory 3-2 over OMG.
So yeah, I mean, to have all these best of fives, and this one being, whatever it is, the 10th, 11th best of five, be the first one to go to 5 games, when game fives were actually really common in the LPL. You see absolute slugfests of series prior, is pretty crazy. And for it to be JDG versus OMG of all series, like, you'd think maybe IGNIP was going to go 5 games, not JDG versus OMG, but OMG definitely impressed in this one. They took the game 1. I feel like JDG was very much draft gapped in the game number 1. At least that's what I put down in my notes. And I guess when I was watching the game, that's the way I felt there. Just with the hard engage, with the Aurora pick and the Varus and the Zinzao being able to block all the damage from the. I think it was just the lack of damage there in game number 1 for JDG. They have the Vladimir, so Scout needs to be the one that has to pop off. Ash is also going to have all her damage blocked by the Zinzao. And then the whole tank Jace thing, it's kind of moved now to a Black Cleaver build, but still, it's not doing a lot of damage to kill the Zinzao. So I think a big draft gap started the momentum for OMG, at least as far as game 1 went.
And you saw it kind of round out towards that games 4 and 5 just as well. We even saw the return of the Elise support, which I'm pretty sure will plague the entirety of just about any league, not just the LPL, because I've seen some videos. Solo queues already having some struggles there, so we'll see how that pans out. But again, one of the closest matches for OMG. Where did it go wrong exactly? Because the last 2 games, they were vastly different. I mean, that game with Elise specifically, 20 minutes. That
Oh,
was
yeah.
a shellacking.
And I tweeted about this, just the set pick in
Plug the
general.
tweet. Plug the tweet. I like it. I like it.
Yeah, I compared it to APA's Yone counter pick back at Worlds against FlyQuest. It was like, they're banning Yone all series long from Scout. We know how good of a Yone player Scout is. They give Scout or Yone to Scout in game number 4 to pick the set mid, which I guess was supposed to be some type of cook to prevent the Yone from popping off. It was not the pick. It
No.
did not stop Scout from doing what he does on Yone. And again, they had the Elise. It was kind of all over the place. They had the Lilia as well, a really lack of reliable CC for the Kaisa to go in. So if we're talking about where this fell apart, I mean, that's clear. 20-minute game. They really started cooking with some picks here, did OMG. They were up 2-1, and then that's where their momentum crumbled. And then going into game 5, it was a little bit closer. But I have to go back to Scout, too, on this Akali orbital.
Yep.
Absolute masterclass on the Akali in game 5.
Yeah, there's no other words to put it. And then you just have stalwart strength on the other sides. I mean, everyone on the roster putting up some decent numbers in there. Pays, of course, 24, 9, and 28. Ale on the top side, 12, 9, and 27. And it just felt like everyone was able to pull together towards the end. Granted, JDG wiping the sweat a little bit from their foreheads there. I don't think anyone wants to round out, especially because Yanni had them winning 3-0. So, if we had Yanni here, if he was, maybe sleep talking a little bit going, man, I really wish it was a 3-0. But either way, a win is a win. As we said, JDG had that doubleheader on the week, which does mean that they are now pretty squarely up in their own bracket side. I'm trying to double check where they would be. Yeah, they are in the top of the group for Group B, as we're waiting to see the rest of the matches shake out there. Moving on, of course, moving into the third to last series that we had was Top Esports versus Anyone's Legend, and I mean, Anyone's Legend still rocking the legend tag.
Absolutely. And my prediction for this series was actually 3-1 Tess. I'm going to double check it right now. It was. And I don't know what part of me had the belief that we saw this matchup in Demacia Cup in the grand finals, and it was the exact same scoreline. Anyone's Legend came out with that 3-1 win. And I don't know, I just believed that Top Esports was going to kind of wake up and like be the top esports that we've known for the past couple of years, to be kind of one of the top teams in the LPL. But and Anyone's Legend hasn't really, they've kind of been wandering around the middle of the pack for the last couple of years, especially their roster last year. But this year, they've really come into the best version of Anyone's Legend that we've really ever seen. And this is the series that really stamped their name as a formidable component or opponent in the LPL, and like a whole contender. These guys could win the LPL. And, obviously I think it's certain that BLG is probably the favorite of the entire LPL, but Anyone's Legend with this series, I mean, you have to keep your eyes on them.
I would agree, especially because they've made I don't want to say top drop the ball, because you take a look at the first 3 games and they went 40 minutes plus in every single one. I mean, game 1, 40 minutes, 35 seconds. Game 2, 43 minutes, 53 seconds. These were not easy victories and losses for either team to take. So to actually give Anyone's Legend that respect to say, hey, we can tangle with the best of them at the very end. And shout out, by the way, to Hope with the hope of the century, 29, 3, and 36. By the way, to have over close to what? That is I'm fairly certain that's about what, 2 hours of game time in the 3 games before, and to only have 3 deaths in the series in the entirety is wildly good stuff on the player plus the team for keeping the ADC alive.
I think Hope is one of the more underrated players in the whole LPL. Like, this is a player who is on the JDG roster that went all the way to semifinals and lost to T1 back in 2022. So it's a player who's been on Apex teams in the LPL before, but isn't talked about as much as, your Jackie Loves Ruler when he was in the LPL. Now Pays is going to get a whole lot of talk because Pays is incredible, but you know, Hope isn't talked about as much as the other top 80 carries, and performances like this are huge and in big moments when you're playing against top teams like that. So I think it's really important you mentioned that. And I think there's a lot of depth on this Anyone's Legend roster as well in terms of their roster with who can carry. You have Shanks, who is one of my favorite mid laners in the LPL. I love this player. Super aggressive, can, kind of run it down at times, but is very, very good and also puts on those carry performances. Tarzan as well, killer performance, 21, 7, and 40. And this guy, when it's not the world championship, is killer. Tarzan is insane. I say when it's not the world championship, I had to throw a little bit of shade there because he's had a couple rough world championships, but Tarzan is the real deal in the LPL. This guy is a fantastic jungler, world class, and showed that in this series. Was so key for Anyone's Legend in their success, especially in fights, setting up ganks. He's just such a sound player.
I mean, it's one of the reasons why we did enjoy watching that series as a whole, but there is one series that some people would maybe not want to rewatch or relive. Billy Gaming going up against LNG Esports in what I do believe is the fastest series of the week. Every single game under 30 minutes. BLG played no games with the games.
Yeah, and I forgot today, truth be told, that there was 2 matches being played. I remember seeing it the week before. I was like, oh, there's 2 matches on that Saturday. I'll keep that in mind. Totally forgot. And I only watched the RNG versus IG series. But yeah, you're talking about fastest game time. I'm looking at it right now. Every game less than 30 minutes. You're looking at the KDAs from the primary carry players of BLG in Knight and Elk. 16-2 for Knight, who I think we can unequivocally say is the best mid laner in LPL and contending for best mid laner in the world, like up there with the, your Chovy and everything over in the LCK. Elk, stellar performance. Even Way, 15-3 and 24. I mean, this BLG team, sometimes you see teams that get all the way to the world final or win world finals. They kind of like hiccup at the start of the season, maybe because they didn't get enough rest. And everyone's like, oh my God, what happened to this team?
Yep.
It is not the case with this BLG team. Not the case at all.
No. And for LNG, it hurts a little bit, but you have to sit there and go, we got to figure it out, right? At the end of the day, you got to sit there and take your licks. And unfortunately, you're sitting at the bottom of the tables. And this Group C is unfortunately shaken out much cleaner. As with that victory by BLG, it does shake up. Thunder Talk Gaming is sitting at 2-0. BLG is sitting at 2-0, and both EDG and LNGD sitting with 0-2s. So unfortunately, I'm pretty sure that does lock in the two that'll be moving on to Group C.
And it's unfortunate for LNG. I don't know. They kept Zika, who I think, and also Weiwei, who are two pretty solid players. Fotik and Zhuo, and then Hai Chao, again, not having the best of seasons in previous years. And these are, just, I think, the players that people were most skeptical about. And they were kind of like saying, okay, so this team before, they had Scout, they had Gala. These are like household names in the LPL as of now. And then they're kind of taking a, I don't want to say they're taking a risk on these players, because again, I don't know the whole history about them, but truth of the matter is, like you said, Orbital, it's just not working. They're not able to find success. The big matches for them, going back to it, just all the way back to week one, big matches like TT, where TT is that middle of the pack team. You need these wins. You're expected to lose to BLG, but you don't clutch up in those games. And now when it comes to these matches, now you're gone. So who knows what'll be the case for LNG going forward. But yeah, again, it's kind of similar to Team We. I guess we'll have to see. But yeah, of course, BLG definitely the favorites. I mean, it's no surprise that they 3-0 here.
I respect it a lot, and hopefully we get to see even more of it in the future, because now we go back to the other team that I unfortunately, and disrespectfully, by the way, please, no disrespect in the future from me. We got IG that rocked it back now against RNG here. This was our final series of the week, the second series on the day that was just earlier. And honestly, this was a welcome breath of fresh air, I think, to anyone that has been following Invictus Gaming and saying, hey, we needed that win, especially after NIP took them down at the start of the week. They were able to win it out 3-1 after dropping the first game against RNG.
It was a sigh of relief after game number one, because it was RNG that took game number one. And IG, I have it in my notes, quote unquote, IG is hinting game one, enough said. That's what I wrote for this game in my notes. And there was some really interesting plays. You know, I remember a play where the Shy is getting picked off on the Jace in the jungle out of nowhere. The Kaisa for Gala, I also thought didn't make a ton of sense in this composition. I kind of just thought to myself, they're not really playing dive. They have Maokai, they have Zyra, they have Jace and Corki for poke. I think they're just playing Kaisa because it's Gala, right? It's Gala Kaisa. It's just iconic. RNG and Milky Way as well. Milky Way is a beast. Great performance on the Karthus, went absolutely absurd. But then IG, they woke up.
Yep. I love the fact that you dropped it off right there, because that's what happened. 40-minute game for game 2, and then after that it felt like it smoothed out. 28 minutes for game 3, and then game 4, 31:50 on the clock. And for Royal Never Give Up, they are trying not to give up. They are currently sitting at a 1-1 series record after this, which makes Group D once again the most competitive I think that we've seen so far after before Group A. Don't worry, I understand this, because we have NIP sitting at 1-0, we have RNG sitting at 1-1, we have IG sitting at 1-1, and we have Fun plus Phoenix sitting at 0-1. Honestly, this Group D, as we said before, even in our pre-show all the way back in episode 1, this is the one group that has the most, I want to say, variables for change. And the fact that we are sitting at pretty much a near even state for everyone speaks to that.
Yeah, we said in episode 1, RNG is a team that could surprise, and that made this series all the more scary for IG, because they'd already lost NIP, like we mentioned. If they drop here, they are like out of playoffs, basically, or very close to being out of playoffs, which would be a enormous upset for all the hype that this team has got. So it is a tough loss to RNG. They do have that win against FPX. They're going to have to try and really hope that they can pull off the win against their next opponent, which is NIP, because I think it's safe to say IG likely going to be the victors over FPX there, and they will have that 2-1 record. And the same thing can be said for the FPX NIP game, which we've still yet to see. But yeah, I think aside from game number 1 statement series from IG, I think especially for Rookie too, game 2 Akali was an absolute banger. His Swain in game 3 as well. There was a fight where he hit like a 3-person never move, which is Swain's pull for those who don't know. And that set up a huge ace, which just snowballed the whole game. I think Rookie is 100% the MVP here for IG in this series. And again, just reiterating, it was an absolute must win for them, and they got it done. They tried to funnel Milky Way here, did RNG, especially in that game number 3 with the Kindred pick. But once he falls behind, it kind of all falls apart. I just do want to mention Milky Way is a beast, and pay attention to this player more in LPL. He is the real deal and will be the real deal soon.
We got to give credit where credit is due, and I feel like Ferris is just like, please don't forget that I am giving credit where credit is absolutely due.
Yes,
And
exactly.
that makes us very, very happy. Once again, all of those kind of shaken out here, and that's gonna be the fun for it. Honestly, I'm excited to see what some of the other matches will come about. I believe that is in a week or so, as well as the next match will all the way be in February, so a little bit further out than we were expecting.
Yeah, it's going to be starting up on the 8th. The first batch will be Ninjas in Pajamas versus FPX. Each team, except for NIP and FPX, actually have played 2 matches. So actually, in terms of the standings here, we pretty much have a really good inkling as to who is making it out. Again, if Top Esports drops to LGD, that'll be a surprise, but we expect them to win AL and Test to move on. There's some parity there if RNG is able to beat Ninjas in Pajamas, but Group C is already locked. We know that. And I think Group B is already locked as well because it's just Weibo and JDG to duke it out in week 3. So a lot was revealed to us in this week number 2.
A lot was absolutely revealed. So let's go over week 3 just for some funs and giggles, because technically there are only 2 matches, I believe, for week 3. It is NIP versus FPX. Who do you think is going to take that one, Ferris?
Definitely Ninjas in Pajamas. I mean, I think that's just clear.
All right.
If I'm going to go even deeper, though, in my series prediction,
Yep.
it's going to be 3-0.
Ooh, okay. I don't think any more words need to be exchanged because of what you already told us, and I have to sit there and kind of agree. NIP getting a chance at glory, I think that's fantastic. For week 3, though, there is another matchup that will be on that Sunday as well, or at least Sunday for us here in the US. It is going to be WBG Weibo Gaming versus JDG. Who do you think is taking that one in series score as well?
That's going to be a really, really good game. Tien, obviously going up against his former team in Top Esports, is going to be an absolute banger. And honestly, it's really hard to say because both of these teams are very good. But with the tough loss that Top Esports has taken to Anyone's Legend, I'm actually going to take a chance here, and I'm going to go with Weibo, who I think have been on a pretty good hot streak. And I'm going to predict them to take it. I'm going to go with. See, it's hard to say about the stock standard thing to do is to say a 3-2 just because it's 2 really good teams going at it. But with this whole Fearless thing, game 5s are so rare that, you know what? I'm going to go out and give a bold prediction. Or actually, I think it's Weibo JDG. I think I was saying Top Esports. I think I messed the whole thing up. So anyways, I'm going to take, so I was thinking about the complete wrong team, JDG Top Esports. It's JDG actually. So I think I'm still gonna stick to my guns. I'm gonna go with Weibo, and I'm gonna say a 3-1, just because it's the same thing whether it's Top Esports or it's JDG. It's 2 top teams, and again, game 5s are so rare that I think it's just gonna be Weibo in 4, and I think they're gonna finish 3-0 in this group.
Oh, okay. I like it. I like it because that does round out Group B. That'll be a lot of fun either way. So I have to wait and see how it does play out, and we have gotten our predictions as well. Yanni still snoozes away because he deserves his well-earned rest. The man is a legend for staying up so late to cast some of those games over there in the LPL, which we have enjoyed throughout the entirety of this week. Now, keep in mind, as we said, matches will start up in February. Keep that in mind. The matches that we just went over, week 3, technically, will be starting for us February 8th, and then there'll be more matches in week 4 before we head to the knockout stage. With that being said, thank you so much for joining us here for the Aftermath, the LPL recap, episode number 2, with myself, Orbital, and Ferris, and Yanni, and maybe some guests in the future. Thank you so much.